Folks, the Four Nation Faceoff has kicked off. Darlene, UPL, Yoki Haru, all in action. The Sabres have 28 games remaining in their season. And is the answer in that locker room? We're going to talk about all that and more because this is the Crossing Swords podcast. Folks, welcome back to the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel, where sometimes our signals get crossed, but our swords always are. And don't you worry, don't you fret sitting at home. Yes, we are missing some Sabres hockey, but we are not alone in doing so. We have a full panel here today. The man, the myth, the legend, VC3 with us here. Vinny, how we doing?
Great. No complaints. Yet, at least, even though there's no Sabres hockey, there's been some hockey, and it's been so far pretty exciting, which no reason to complain about that.
Not at all. And we'll get to that shortly, just like we're getting to the face that runs the place. Mr. Maniac, sir, how are you doing today?
We're doing well. Haven't blown any leads in the second or third period recently, so we're feeling good about that. And yeah, listen, I just want to get to a place where we can enjoy Sabres hockey, and maybe this is the beginning of that process.
You're asking a lot right now to want to enjoy watching the Buffalo Sabres on TV. I can only do so much, and that's definitely not one of them. But we do have some hockey on, fellas. Four Nations, new kind of format for the All-Star Week for the NHL. First game last night, Rasmus Dahlin in Sweden falls to Canada 4-3. I guess, Vinny, if you want to get us going, did you watch that game last night? How you feeling? There's I got some talking points out of day one already.
Yeah. It was a really interesting situation, which I found myself in yesterday, because I knew that the Four Nations was starting yesterday. And of course, I admit to laughing pretty consistently. It's just seeing like everyone saying like, does anyone know if there's Four Nations facing off tonight or something? And I found that pretty comical. And admittedly, like I didn't really think that I cared that much about it. And I saw something on formerly Twitter, I guess, there was a post about someone saying, hey, look, it's a really interesting decision for the NHL to just take 2 weeks off of hockey immediately after football season ends. And first, my reaction was, yeah, that's kind of dumb. I didn't think that had a lot of thought behind it. But ultimately, a friend of mine actually made what I thought was a really good point. He sort of changed my mind in that ultimately, like if you're able to get eyes on these games, and if it's people that maybe aren't used to watching hockey regularly, you're going to want them to watch the best players. Like ultimately, as great as it would be, I think, for like the normal hockey fans to say, all right, hey, I'm going to turn my attention back to my local NHL team, like people from Buffalo, for example, now that football season's over, you might go back to the Sabres knowing they're not doing so hot. And on a Wednesday night, let's say they're on TNT, you might be watching that fourth line get heavy minutes and think this isn't really inspiring hockey. And so with that said, what my friend was saying was that, hey, if you're going to get these eyes on the best players in the world, potentially, that's probably a better look for the sport of hockey, even though not specifically NHL. Right. And I think that was a really good point. And I sort of happened to watch the beginning of the game by chance. We had drill at the fire department last night. It ended slightly early, went back, there was a TV that happened to have the game on as we were making some tacos in the kitchen. And I was like, oh, I forgot it was happening at 8:00. Right. And Team Canada gets a power play within the first 45 seconds of the game, which huge mistake by Sweden. And you saw 5 of the best players in the world take the ice together for the first time. And within 11 seconds show you exactly why that's going to be entertaining. And the rest of the game was pretty dang good as well. I admit, really surprised Sweden made that a game that went to overtime. After the end of the first period, I thought Canada was going to win 6-1.
Yeah, it was ugly. And we haven't really seen best on best hockey in so long. The NHL hasn't sent players to the Olympics since 2014. sending them again in 2026. This is kind of nice little, like, how is this going to look when that time comes where we finally get to see Olympic hockey again? They announced like the World Cup of hockey. So it seems like the league's going all in on international play. And last night, I mean, it seemed like it was a much better style of hockey than what we're used to during an All-Star game weekend. But Maniac, I know you had some thoughts on the night, especially with our captain, Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah, I do agree on everything that Mr. Cristiano said. I mean, if you're a Sabres fan, this was actually the best case scenario. I think it was stupid for the NHL. I mean, again, they could talk about, trying to, drive that, national allegiance and that attention with this tournament all they want, for sure. But I think it's more embarrassing for the NHL than anything. And point proven with the beginning of last night's game with people, for lack of a better term, jizzing over the McKinnon-McDavid-Crosby combo. How have we not seen that multiple times at an NHL level already? Like, that should have been the biggest indictment on Gary Bettman. He should have had egg all over his face last night when he saw the socials of the entire world going nuts in reaction to that play. Yeah, I mean, the NHL, foolish, silly, no logic, not in their own success, does not do what's in their best interest all the time. But again, you put nations against each other. You put, a different setting, a la the Olympics, a la this Four Nations tournament. You're going to get people excited and you're going to get people passionate. It's definitely good for Sabres fans with us sitting 31 points back of first place in the Eastern Conference right now. So I'll definitely take a tournament that doesn't involve the Sabres playing as a team right now. Let's give them a break and let's see if we can kind of shore up for this last third of the season. But yeah, as far as Dahlin, I'll jump on this point real quick. Yeah. I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's a very popular sexual harassment meme. And it involves like when an attractive man hits on a woman at the workplace, she's like flattered. And then when an unattractive, I know you both were very worried when I started this on, but then when an unattractive man, does the same thing, she's calling HR. This is almost like wearing a Sabres jersey. Wearing a Sabres jersey makes you the unattractive coworker. If Dahlin was coming in a Colorado Avalanche jersey, he would have played 45 minutes last night trying to put out that Canada fire. But instead, he's playing 20 minutes. I don't get it. Maybe it's the start of the tournament. Maybe we'll see down the line. But yeah, it just seems crazy to lose an OT to the powerhouse Goliath of the tournament. Tell me if I'm wrong. And not put your best foot forward. But it seems like that's what they did last night, Gatesy.
Yeah, I mean, that was a perfect segue to what I want to talk about, because I was really interested to see, the Sabres that are playing in this tournament, 2 of the 3, Dahlin, UPL, putting up a ton of minutes this year. UPL is 9th in the league for goalies in minutes. Dahlin's 18th. He's putting up 24 a night. These guys are putting a lot of minutes on their body, trying to will this Sabres team into a win column every single night. I was interested to see, are they going to get that same kind of treatment at this level and get some sort of break? Because the last game of this tournament is February 20th. The Sabres are back in action again 2 days later on the 22nd against the Rangers. There's not a lot of rest time for these players. So if, guys like Dahlin, UPL can get a little bit of rest, I'm all for that. But I was kind of shocked too to see Sweden's defensemen, these older guys, take on so many minutes. Hedman was in the upper 20s. When you got a guy like Dahlin, I think overtime is his thing. But I guess we'll see. It's a long tournament. They're probably going to kind of rotate that throughout the course of these 9 days. But gentlemen, Four Nations, that's why we're here. But the Sabres are sitting 22, 27, and 5 in this break. Last place in the Eastern Conference. They're 5-5 in their last 10. Right now, if there's Sabres game on, how much do you care about watching this team? And, I think we see a lot online of fans are just a little, obviously so, drawn away from the team. We see these videos posted from Maniac on our account of, big plays from years ago, the excitement in the building, the excitement online. It is totally different than what we're seeing today.
I think we talked about it a couple days ago, and I'll let you guys chime in. But, I mean, the arena was near that when they won 10 games in a row in 2018. It's not crazy to get it back, but yeah, they have absolutely diluted the product as far as fan excitement, as far as fan passion. When you look at those crowds, when you look at that excitement off of one goal, off of, a blue collar play from Gaustad or Derek Roy cutting in the slot and firing one. I mean, you just don't have that nowadays. I know, every situation can be a little bit different, but BC, it's just tough for me to get up, especially this year. This year has been it's one thing to lose. But the way they're doing it this year is they're doing it in a way that nobody's ever done it before. They're constantly winning the first period. They're constantly scoring the first goal in these games. And that alone, like that's like a turnover in football almost, scoring the first goal in an NHL game. If you win that battle of scoring the first goal in an NHL game, that should be almost a guaranteed predeterminer of success. But yet, the Sabres have done it at like a first place rate and find themselves in last place, VC. And I just can't get I can't let my heart get pulled by those strings.
Yeah, you can't even get excited. Like, I think we're all guilty of jumping on that, hype train when the Sabres are doing well. But in a game, they go up 2-3 goals. You can't even get excited like, oh, they're going to win this game, because it feels like 9 times out of 10, they're going to somehow lose that game or make it a nail biter at the end where you're like, I'm not even happy about this. They completely fall apart in the end. But Vinny, how are you feeling right now about this team?
I mean, it is honestly remarkable because there are trends over the course of time, right, in hockey that you can see evolve and go different ways. I think one of those that was changing at least a little bit was like that a 2-goal lead is the worst lead in hockey, because over the past couple of years that really hasn't been the case quite as much, and there's a couple reasons for that, except for, well, this year with the Sabres, which is interesting because just thinking about the Sabres' lack of success now over the past decade plus, it's been interesting, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I mean, this is something we can go into great depth to, which I won't right now, but I'm sure at some point I will. They've really tried everything, quite frankly. If I would say, if you give me an example of a thing you wish the Sabres would try to like end the drought, I can go back to one point along this drought and say they've already tried it and it didn't work. Now, sure, ultimately, like you have to do some of these things at the same time, but from a personnel standpoint, they've tried everything. And from a product on the ice standpoint, they've lost games in almost every single way you can imagine, and it just seems impossible. They're a team that I remember 2 seasons ago went on a run where, around this time of year, they were winning games by going down early and then coming back. I think the game that I referenced, I don't remember the date, unfortunately, and I should have had this if I was going to make that point, but I want to say it was mid to late February. They were down to Chicago in Chicago, and they came back in the third period to win, I think 5-4. And I think it might've been Thompson that scored on a shot that like went off the end wall, like the back of the net, or off the boards, bounced back out. The goalie lost his stick, and it was just a crazy sequence that ultimately paid off for the Sabres, and they got some luck and they were able to make those comebacks, but they never came out fast. And now it's the complete opposite of that. And I understand there's different, coaching plays into a lot of these, but yeah, the Sabres are coming out they're coming out with speed, and they're coming out with aggression, and they're coming out with success in a lot of these games. And then ultimately, for whatever reason, and there's reasons, but I'm not going to get into all of them because some of them I think have merit, some of them maybe don't. They just aren't able to sustain that, whether that's because of the philosophy, whether that's because of the system, whether that's because of the talent, whether that's because of the inherent desires or confidence, is, maybe deserves a bigger discussion or debate. But it's just the complete opposite of the teams that we've seen in the past. And yet it's the exact same, because at the end of the day, it results in more losses than wins when you look at the standings.
It's because they tanked 10 years ago. And they tanked 10 years ago, and this team never got back the winning DNA, plain and simple. No, I'm kidding. Do not take that seriously. Do not comment me. But yeah, but with that said, there is almost something like supernatural happening around this team for all these first period leads and just finding new ways in every way to lose a game. So yeah, it's just tough because I have so much PTSD with the Sabres. The game can be over, I could still think there's a chance they could blow it.
Yeah, there's no certainty or comfort watching them play, because it's literally the switch flips in their head, and all the wheels you could ever think of fall off of the bus. Wheels you didn't even know existed on the bus have fallen off, and it's a complete lack of, it feels like, cohesion, where if they're in a fight, they take a jab to the face and they get knocked out from it instead of just taking something on the chin and throwing one back. And I feel like that's been the biggest issue for this year is, we've said it forever. I hate saying it, but they're the youngest team in the NHL. Like they're should be learning, but you need to have fight in the game at the end of the day. Like X's and O's, like I can talk about that after a game as long as I want, but if they don't have that fight within, like it's all really pointless, guys.
Yeah, I would agree. And going back to the point that you said, I think it is almost comical because of how many times that the Sabres do go up 1 or 2 goals in the first period or into the second period. And I can probably go back if I were to search it on messages in my phone and find some of my friends saying, hammer the Kraken money line. Like, because, it just seems like it's become a trend, right? It's, there's the saying, right, of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, at some point, if you get fooled 17 times, I don't know what this, how many more iterations of that saying exist. I mean, ultimately,
Yep.
it is, I used the word remarkable earlier, but it is, and this word gets overused and diluted, but it's literally unbelievable. Like if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, or if you would have told an average hockey fan, hey, there's a hockey team that scores the first goal in a game more than almost any other team in the National Hockey League, what position in the standings do you think they'd sit in? And, the skeptical the fan might be like, this sounds like a trick question. I'm going to guess 29th or something. But realistically, when you look at, when I do broadcasts and I look at game notes, there's usually a trends section, and it always says what the team's record is when scoring first this season and like under their head coach, for example.
Yep.
And that record, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not 9.5 times out of 10, is at or above 500. Because I mean, at some point, like you're a team that's maybe, and again, this is the difference. If you're a team that's not that good, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to hold on to those leads for one reason or another. But at the college hockey level, that's a lot less unbelievable than it is when you're among the best players in the entire world playing in the NHL.
Yeah, it's insane. But Vinny, speaking of trends, our friend Maniac here has been on a bit of a trend recently, profiting from Buffalo. This concept, the more I look at it, the less it makes sense.
Oh my God, my eyes! Who doesn't operate in dark mode here? I had to say.
What are you gonna do?
I'm not in dark mode either.
I feel like I'm looking into an eclipse, but yes. All right, go on.
Yeah. So Maniac, $100 money line every Sabres game, trying to profit from Buffalo. And we haven't updated from the last Predators game, but you're up 3 units right now, a little over 3 units.
Up 3+ units. Like sometimes it's just very easy to see. Like there is absolutely value. You're not going to win every time. I'm not going to say this like that, but like the prime example, like the Mavericks since Luka Doncic got traded are 3-2, and I'm pretty sure I've covered every single game. The Lakers, just lost by like 30 to the Jazz last night with Doncic out there. So sometimes there's just money in the perception, and especially when I started this, we all knew, and maybe like there is an argument either way based on how we've talked about this podcast. We knew that the Sabres were not the last place team in the NHL or the Eastern Conference. They were not that bad. They obviously had played their way to that position. They've blown leads. They've come out slow in some spots. They've done everything like we said. But there was just value that I was going to be betting a team that was technically 30th in the NHL, and the average bettor was going to be seeing that. You look at some of these lines, most of them have been like a pick 'em. There have not been any major, like, I don't think they've been more than plus 200 this entire run. So talk 100%. To me. I mean, like literally, Vegas has it kind of priced in, and I think this team's a little bit better than the perception. Like again, are they playoff team? Obviously not. But I mean, this team should really be more around like the 20th spot in the NHL versus like the 30th.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, last place in the East is just unacceptable. But you look at the other teams we've talked about over the course of forever, who are like now on the same point of the Sabres: Detroit, Ottawa, Montreal, who are in those wild card spots right now. Sabres dead last in the East. But all the doom and gloom in the Sabres, somehow, some way, they find ways to rise to the occasion, Maniac. They find ways to do it on one special night a year. They'll pull out all the strings and, remind us why we're fans of this team again. Year. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to jump in. This year, it was with the Rob Ray induction night where they come out with a win. Obviously, again, they were a small underdog in that spot, but fans will recently think of like Miller night, RJ night, both nights where they were, I'm pretty sure, slight underdogs there as well. They won all 3 times. And then obviously we posted today the anniversary of the first game after the crash flight in Clarence Center. Obviously it was an emotional night for the Buffalo community and everything. That was the first place in the NHL San Jose Sharks, by the way. I'm pretty sure at that time with Nabokov, Thornton, Marlowe, everyone
Pavelski
coming in, and the Sabres jump out to a 3-0 lead. Now they fall behind 5-4 somehow, of course, because, it's Buffalo, and it's also like everyone does forget that Lindy Ruff, like, teams do blow leads all the time. Like, that was happening during the President's Cup, like, era. Like they would blow like a 3-1 lead, go to OT, and then win an OT, and RJ would go nuts, and it would all be okay. But just like this team, I don't know what it is about the blue and gold. I don't know what it is about the Sabres organization. When they have their backs against the wall and they have to get a win, they have to play well at home, they have to play well in a spot, whether it was that night 16 years ago against the Sharks or whether it was the more recent nights where they've been commemorating the player, they've risen to the occasion. So I don't know what it is. I think also if you'd ask Sabres fans, they would tell you that like recently, like in the last decade, Sabres play better against like a top 10 team than they do against a bottom 10 team. Like, for example, the Lightning, Bruins, et cetera, the last couple of years. I think that's been often a talking point that we play well against those squads, but then we drop against the mediocre in the middle of the line. So there's just something weird about this team's DNA. And you see it in those clips that the passion of this fan base, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's just waiting to be manipulated in a way that it can be driven towards this organization. And when this team starts rising to the occasion on a full-time basis, we know that the fans will be there.
Exactly. I think it's only fair that the Sabres do 41 promotion nights next year for home games. We're going to have 41 banner raisings, and the Sabres are going to sweep KeyBank Center next year. I think that's the only way this team can get to that next level.
Yeah, I do like the Bisons. I mean, the Bisons came out with their promo schedule, and it's fantastic. I mean, shout out to Pat Malacaro and everyone from the Bisons organization. This summer seems like it's going to be electric at Salem Field. And so, yeah, maybe the key for the Sabres is just funneling some sort of promotion into every single home game that you can get. But yeah, I mean, it is, I'm sure that, those numbers exist of what the record is when there's like a significant event going on. And I think there's definitely a line though, like the more significant the event, the better it seems the Sabres play. And then there might be a bit of a drop when you get to like the normal theme nights. I think there's a couple of those days that maybe the Sabres have put up some stinkers, but also, I mean, all of this is to say it's like as if no other team does that. Like the good teams in the NHL also lose games, right? Like no one's going undefeated in the NHL. But there is the point, and this is exactly what Maniac said, in that when you look at a Sabres season at the conclusion of it, you have a tendency to have the recency bias to the end, right? A couple years ago, we were so close, and it was like, man, if we didn't lose to Detroit, they would have made it. Yep. Oh, if we could have beat the Rangers, we lost 3-2, outplayed them, but just couldn't, we got goalied, right? Well, ultimately, it's not that game that is literally the reason we lost the playoffs. It's like, yeah, it's the long losing streak in November that cost us, or the 6-1 loss to Montreal when we just decided not to show up that cost you this many points. And of course, this year, yeah, like wherever the Sabres end up finishing,
we were just talking that 22-23 run. You were talking about the Blackhawks game. There was a game thrown in there, like with like 15 games left. We lost 10-4 to the Stars at home. We allowed 10 goals. Like I'm just saying, like they find a way, Vinny. They find a way.
Right. And so, and the last point is that, right, like it ultimately, it's not only exclusive to Buffalo. Like this does happen to other NHL teams. I mean, I'm sure like when we would go in and beat Tampa Bay at home, the Lightning fans would leave that game being like, how do we lose to the Sabres? And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But also the Lightning are going to win 4 of their next 5 and be fine. Whereas the Sabres are going to lose 4 of their next 5 in this scenario where they've just beaten the Lightning. They're going to come home and they're going to play a struggling Ottawa team, and Ottawa's going to beat them 7-2, right? Or something of that nature, right? But ultimately, I say all this because I'll use another saying, right? Which is, you hear this like in elementary school, which is that people might forget what you say to them, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And I think a lot of what we're talking about illustrates how Sabres fans know how and can feel passionate and exude that passion for hockey and for the team. And ultimately, they just are now reserving that for the moments where it makes sense. And so it comes out when it's, I'll call it quote unquote deserved. And when you look back on those teams in 2006 and 2007, and even in 2011, when they made the playoffs, it doesn't mean that every game was perfect. And it doesn't mean that the Sabres never did things that were ultimately criticized or not as good as they could have been. I mean, again, if a team won the Stanley Cup, I think you could wipe out any mistake they made basically throughout the season because it doesn't matter at the end. But ultimately, they've never won the last game of the season in the postseason, right? So with that said, just because the Sabres were better then and it made everyone feel good and feel passionate doesn't mean that there were never days that made everyone want to rip their hair out, right? And so that context is important. But I will say those teams figured it out. Whereas, again, for the last decade plus, for whatever reason, the Sabres can't seem to do that, which is ultimately why it's aggravating. And I think it's justified that everyone's got to reserve their more excitement type feelings for when it's ultimately deserved or feels needed.
100%.
It had been too long since I had gotten a good Cristiano take. He just took me on the whole state of the Sabres franchise as well as the span of the NHL and put everything in context. Let's go.
All in one. And I mean, fellas, the Sabres being what they are have really put eyes on the Buffalo Bandits. Make sure to follow our new page, Banditos Pod, Instagram, Twitter, for all things Bandits, because it's nice to enjoy a winning team here in Buffalo. And thank you all for winning here with us on your Thursday afternoon Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs. And the Sabres in their quote-unquote all-star break right now. Maniac, do you have an all-star from this Sabres team this year where, with all the doom and gloom, all the last place in the Eastern Conference standings, you could be like, okay, this guy at least makes me happy to turn on my TV a couple times a week?
Yeah, I mean, it should probably be the equipment guy with, how many sticks they've been breaking and how sad this bunch has been. But I'll go with probably the obvious answer. Darlene's stuff doesn't show up as much to me. He's obviously a very high quality player. You could argue him 10 times out of 10 in the spot, but I'll go with Tage Thompson. The Clapper's unstoppable. And if we're going to wrap it back to kind of the beginning of this episode, I kind of missed out on this point. If we're talking about Darlene playing time, how is Tage not in the mix here?
Crazy. I mean, they brought in Chris Kreider to be that fourth line guy for USA.
Fucking Kreider? Yep. Is it 2021?
I wish at this point with this team.
Okay, I will say this. I don't hate it as much as a lot of other people do. Only because Thompson's injuries, I don't hate him getting this, hey, just get back. Just get back. Because ultimately, there is the little minute possibility of the Sabres making something happen. Well, I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying it is mathematically there. I want Tage, as much as I would love watching Tage Thompson on the international stage and getting a Buffalo Sabre in that lineup and giving him the opportunity to play with the red, white, and blue on the jersey, which would be awesome. I want him to be healthy, and I want him to be healthy so that he can play healthy for the Buffalo Sabres. Because when he is healthy, he's really good in blue and gold. So I don't hate it as much as maybe I did originally. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys are one to dwell on X's too much, but seeing Eichel on that top line for USA just really, I don't know if I'm numb to it yet, but it sucks seeing, especially when Tuck's not there, Thompson's not on that team.
I don't know if I'm just over it. I spent my time for years. The only thing that still remains sour of me about Eichel is the way his agent who he fired handled the whole thing with the releasing the statements and all that. It was a player and an organization issue. He wanted his way out of here. I mean, you could probably debate that there are probably some players on the current roster that want their way out of here that we're looking at as admirable guys. So it's I don't hold him accountable for that. But geez, what a dweeb him and his agent were with how they were releasing press statements and things like that. It was just an absolute joke. That's the only thing that remains with me, VC3.
I think he's a player that we're gonna see on he'll be on a podcast or something I don't know, let's call it 12 years from now, and he's gonna they're gonna ask him about things from his NHL career, and I think he's gonna look back on that, and I don't know if he'll I'll call it admit that it maybe wasn't handled properly, but I think he'll reflect a little more positively about things. And ultimately, maybe he'll call out some of the things that didn't go well, where he didn't feel supported by the organization. I think some of that may be justified, and some of the things are maybe just him handling it that way because he was young and because he was maybe a little more immature. I mean, I'm I'm 24 years old, and when I feel bothered by things, I don't handle them as well as I would like to when I look back on it. And I'm sure in 10 years, I'm going to go back at certain days and go, wish I could have been a little more mature about that. And I think that might have been a situation that he might go back, and he already kind of did. I mean, in that first interview, right, Vegas comes back, lose, Krebs and Tuck both score in that game. Another instance of the Sabres rising to the occasion.
That was
National
a great
television.
day. It's all been downhill
back
since.
in Buffalo. Sabres rise to the occasion. Eichel has that, infamous interview afterwards where he says, wow, building's never been that loud, Like
that was. I mean, listen, I do not always agree with Mike Harrington. I'll call him out when I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong a lot or whatever. He's also right pretty frequently, enough to where he's clearly kept his job and he's a voice in the thing. He has a great point that, like, he was talking about it recently. He's like, for some reason, like, he was not slated to even be like available, and they just like shuffled him out. Like, that was a crazy decision by whoever was in that, with knowing, like, if you had just taken one look at that arena when we scored the empty net goal to go through, and there was no way on earth that they should have been allowing Jack Eichel to talk to the media alone.
Yeah. And so my ultimate point is, the next time he came back and Vegas ends up winning that game. Now, of course, it was not ideal scenario, because they really.
By the way, his expected goals for was like 12 that game. So the fact that he even scored 3 was like kind of pitiful. And as said, watch that game. He had breakaways. Like, they wanted him to get a hat trick, it almost seemed.
Yeah. And so ultimately, and now after the game, you're going to feel a lot better and more inclined to have a positive interview where you're in a good mood. But he even acknowledged in an interview, maybe, and I don't have his exact quote, so, you can go back and find it. But ultimately, he basically said something to the effect of, I let the moment get to me a little bit in that, not only in the game, maybe, but specifically in the post-game media availability. And he said some things that ultimately were more emotionally based and not physically and not like coherently based on what would have made more sense to say. And ultimately, it was true. I mean, he was aggravated, and the fans definitely did not want him to succeed, and for the most part, and that was evident. And so, I think that's a situation that we're going to come back to, maybe in a decade or so. And I think he might have a different perspective on that. And I think I'm going to just guess, we'll see if it comes true, that was maybe something he'll reflect on with a little more perspective, I guess. But I guess we'll see. But I don't want, we've kind of turned away from the topic, which was Sabres All-Stars this year. And I guess I'll save mine, because Gatesy, I'm interested to hear yours before I pick mine, because I want to go in one of two directions. Maybe you'll take one away.
Yeah, I think there's a couple options. I was going to go with this, but I mean, the one that makes the most sense to me right now is Yuri Kulik. He's been a guy who, was slotted, but I think we got a lot of fans to, be that next guy to come in and, take over that team in some capacity. And, he had all the eyes on him since he was really drafted. He really took over Rochester, him and Roseanne. Struggled last year when he got called up to Buffalo. This year, though, gets called up, immediately put on, in a great spot to try and succeed. And he took it and ran with it. He's now first line center of the team. There seems no one's going to ever take that spot from him, how it looks, just the way he's playing. It seems like every night he's showing up, and he's still getting better. Obviously, he's a young kid. He's 20, got it right here. He's 20, but he has 11 goals in 40 games right now for the Sabres, on pace to be 20 goal scorer as a rookie. Like, you're going to take that, especially on the first line. He stepped in and is playing a big role, especially on the defensive side of things. Like, I've loved how he's been on faceoffs, how he's really improved there. But he's been a guy I've been really happy with, just because there's been so many, I feel like, Sabres prospects who we rush up and it doesn't turn out. And we try to force, a square peg into a round hole until we trade that for another square peg that doesn't fit into a round hole. And we keep doing that cycle over and over again. Glad the Sabres kind of took their time a little bit with him, found success, and are now giving him opportunities to shine. But Vinny, who are you thinking about for your All-Star here?
Well, to be honest with you, I feel weird not saying the guy that ultimately is our best player, which is Rasmus Dahlin.
100%.
But I'm like, my answer kind of was not going to be him, just to say someone that maybe wasn't obvious. And maybe, I don't know, if we can go back and amend, in theory, amend the question to say, who's the Sabres All-Star among the guys who aren't playing hockey during this
Yes.
all-star break, if you will, because Dahlin, of course, is the marquee player in that sense. UPL obviously has been important. He's been our number one goaltender, uncontested. Yeah, you probably want some more saves from him from time to time, but ultimately I don't know that we're going to look back on the season and say that, man, if we had goaltending, we could have been someone. I don't think that's been the issue at all. Or at least not like consistently. Like, yeah, every once in a while you're going to get a bad game, but like, again, that's hockey. So my answer is going to be Jason Zucker. I mean,
I like
a guy who came into the team this year, and I expected him to have success. As a player who'd been on teams and had success like he has before, I figured that he would bring something special to the roster, just in the sense of filling a hole that I think we needed, which was that talented veteran presence, because we were losing that. And ultimately, I didn't expect him to have the goal scoring that he does. I expected him to ultimately be one of our better goal scorers, but he's got 41 points in 52 games. He scored 18 goals already, and he's a +2. Now, I know plus minus is like a stat that's really surface level, but he's just played solid hockey, and I think he's really exceeded expectations. And there's a reason that within NHL circles, he's sort of talked about as, hey, Sabres selling at the deadline, this guy's going to get them, quote unquote, a haul because of how well he's playing this year. Do I buy into that? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, I think he might be right now someone who is deserving of maybe an all-star-ish nod from the Sabres roster, who maybe doesn't have as many guys who are playing at that level as consistently as, in my opinion, Jason Zucker is.
100%. And I mean, he's been a guy. Now the conversation is, what's going to happen to him in the offseason? The Sabres going to extend him now. They're going to, obviously, they better try to get him on board. And I think another talk about Sabres management right now, and someone who could be on the move, Dylan Cousins. There's been chirping all online. Kevin Weeks toys with the Buffalo fan base for 24 hours, posting Chippewa Street with eyeballs. We see stuff from, a couple other insiders.
I didn't know how much of a loser Kevin Weeks was with that
Crazy.
tweet. I guess I've only seen the stuff that he actually that comes to fruition. I thought when I saw that tweet, I thought, oh my God, something is happening. And I'm not someone who when a certain group tweets out, South Buffalo is buzzing. I'm not buying into that. I'm not buying into any of the other groups, but I really I had the wool pulled over my eyes by Kevin Weeks and all his bullshit, crazy angle updates. Guy is just a loser.
Yeah, to do that when the fan base is in the state that we're in and want some sort of good news, and to go 24 hours without tweeting a single thing was crazy. But the talk is Dylan Cousins. Teams are interested in him. He's got that big contract. One, do you think the Sabres are going to move on from, the workhorse from Whitehorse? And do you want to see that change of scenery for him? I guess, Vin, you want to go first?
I struggle so much with this question, admittedly. I really want Dylan Cousins to be here and have success here. And I don't think that's a novel thing to say that. I think most people do. I don't know if there's really that high of a contingent of Sabres fans that want him gone at whatever cost just because he has been so bad this year, I guess is the word I'll use. But ultimately, the reason I struggle is because, there has been those moments of wow, not only in the season where he was an incredible goal scoring machine, the situations he found himself in being a well-rounded player. I mean, he was able to put up decent numbers defensively. He stood up he was a physical guy. He would go out and get in fights, and he would provide that vigor that I think the lineup needed. And it got eyes to the game. It got eyes on the team. And that was something that I think we have said is that's missing. That energy at times is missing. And that's valuable. And I don't want him to go because of that. One of my favorite moments of the past 10 years from watching the Sabres is his goal in overtime against the Islanders on the Hail Mary pass from Dahlin. I was at the game and I was sitting in the lower bowl on the opposite side of the ice. So he scored on the far net from me. And I was so excited by that. That's the closest I think I've ever been to actually passing out in my entire life. I genuinely, that's not a exaggeration. my vision got blurry and I saw stars, and I like leaned over into my girlfriend who was sitting next to me. She's like, "You okay there, dude?" And I was just like, "Ah," like I just was yelling.
You're doing the same thing with you're doing that with your hands too when you were doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't.
I would have been worried too. I probably would have been calling an usher.
The lower bowl it's tight in the lower bowl in the corners. You know, we were like kind of in the corner. The seats are like angled, so they're all facing the ice. So between, I didn't have a lot of room, so I had my hands were in here like I was Ricky Bobbying it. But ultimately, yeah, I thought that was special, and ultimately, like, I don't want to see him go because he created that moment and many other special ones. But right now, it seems like he doesn't have what he used to have, or if he has it, he can't get to it here, which is tough.
Maniac, how do you feel about that?
I'm not giving up another player off this roster. If you want your way off the Sabres team, you play out your contract and you play as badly as you have to play. I don't care. I'm not going to watch another young 20-something leave this team and go become like a top 20 player in the league. We all know he's going to do it. Like, this is the one, like, there was no doubt about like Eichel and Reinhart. Like, we all knew they were good. We were kind of happy with the return on the trades when we got it. People used to tweet "won the trade" for the Jack Eichel thing, like if that's a memory. But for me, I can't get rid of Cousins. I just can't. I know that I've seen the tweets, I've seen the graphs, I've seen everything. I've seen everyone talking about how he is not the kind of player that he was. He's a shell of himself. I get it. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I'm sorry, we can't get rid of him.
I have an idea. Okay, so I think he was with the Phillies at the time. What if the Sabres do to Cousins what the Phillies fans did for Trey Turner? Do we think that would work?
Yeah.
Because I like watching Dylan cut. Like, I think, I don't wish unsuccess. I want success, right? And ultimately, I want him to have confidence. I want him to play. I want him to enjoy his life. I want him to wake up in the morning and go, I'm excited to go play hockey. And if he's not that right now because he's in a slump, that's unfortunate. Maybe we got to Trey Turner it. I don't remember who the radio show host from Philly was that sort of started that movement, but it kind of worked, right? I mean, maybe that we got to do that in the 716. I don't know.
At this point, what else can we do?
And as I get older, like, I'm sorry, like, Dylan Cousins signed a $50 million contract. Like, I don't want to hear anything about like not loving hockey, not like having a passion for the game. If you pay me $50 million to go lick the fucking pavement right now, I will be the most passionate road licker that you have ever seen in your life. So I don't want to hear. I mean, this guy had his option. He knew exactly the state of the Sabres when he came in. He knew that he could have played out a couple more years and gotten his free agency. He chose to sign a 7-year, $50 million deal. And I know that the argument is really more, well, he stinks now. You're trying to get rid of him. You're trying to hedge your bet on what you're lost. I'm ready to ride out the full loss. I'm ready to ride out a full. I'm not canceling the Batgirl movie. Okay. No. We are putting the movie on. We are not getting the tax refund. We are not like buying out of a bad situation. We're just going to go through it. And whatever happens, happens. Dylan Cousins is a Sabre until 2031.
Oh, God.
Wow, that's a long time. Not even like, I don't even say that because, man, if he plays like this till 2031, it's going to be tough. It's crazy to think that that's it's similar, but not really.
He's 23 right now, too. Yeah, I know that there's, you should be coming into your peak as like an NHL player at this window. But I mean, are we like, I could just see, I mean, we deal him to someone. Oh my gosh. I could just see the 25 goal seasons. I could just see like those clutch overtime goals when everyone's like battling in the double overtime playoffs. Like, I can just see it. I can literally see it already happening. But you know what? Everyone wants to get rid of him because he's played bad for a season and a half, essentially.
Yep.
That seems to be the consensus.
We've never done that before. So, why would we start now?
And to go back to your point, VC3, the pass from Dahlin, like this era of they always say like history is written by the victors. This Sabres team is going to lose their history into oblivion. You have the Cousins moment from that season. A lot of people forget the last call of RJ was an overtime goal by Casey Middlestat. That is now gone. That is now completely nothing as far as like you can cling to that moment, but this franchise has made it meaningless. Just like you can cling to all the great moments that Lindy Ruff has, but slowly but surely, every time they blow a game this season, it just means a little bit less. And again, I love you two. Have just had such focused talking points on this entire show, and I just blow it up into oblivion. And I apologize, but I also love it because we're winning lots more, like you do at Batavia Downs.
Exactly. And just like the Sabres, you might have a game plan, and then you decide you don't want to use it anymore. We're just channeling our inner Buffalo Sabres today, and I don't have any qualms with that. But what I do have qualms with, our owner, Terry Pegula, states the answer and the solution is in the locker room. That's been the big talking point for seems like way too long now. But with 28 games left in the season, the Sabres have not made any move. The move they made was just claiming James Reimer back after they waived him already. Couple AHL moves up and down. Nothing of substance in Buffalo. One, do you think the solution's in the room? And two, are we going to see any sort of move here toward the trade deadline, fellas?
I don't know. Again, like it's, the reason we ask the question is to give an answer, but I'm ultimately I have such a hard time believing anything that comes out of my own mouth sometimes, because ultimately it's been, whether it's been the opposite or whether it's actually happened and then not worked out, the feeling in the end is the same. I do think the Sabres will probably make a move. I don't think it's going to be anything really spectacular. I could see like one of those like AHL trades, where like we get someone who is from Buffalo or like from Utica to come play for us, and they're in Anaheim's farm system, and we send someone who's not really playing in Rochester so that, they'll actually get AHL minutes in California or something. Like I could see something like that happening. I do think that there's not really going to be huge moves this year. And ultimately, whether the solution is in the room or not, I don't know, because this is a Sabres team, or a portion of it at least, that at times can play like a top 10 team in the NHL. This is an organization, while not all the same players, that 2 seasons in a row had 10-game winning streaks, and then ultimately lost enough games after that to not only fall out of being the best team in the East and best team in the NHL at one point, but being a bottom 8 team in the NHL, and at times a bottom 6 team, before ultimately, having the 8th draft pick for what feels like the umpteenth year in a row. But ultimately, I think at my core, I do believe to a certain extent that on any given night, any NHL team can win, because the game is so unique. Like, because there's 82 games, like ultimately anyone can beat anybody. But consistently, if you're able to do that, so many things have to come together at the right moment, yet it's so, I'll call it easy to get to that point for seemingly everyone else but Buffalo. I don't know what there is anymore, because we've tried to keep the same players. We've tried to get new players, and we've tried I don't know, maybe we haven't tried the trades as much to a certain extent. We've traded away, but we haven't really gone and like bought someone, right? So maybe that is the big thing we haven't really done, is going out and really paying a lot to get a proven person, because we've clearly sold some of our proven players, and we've gone and signed in free agents that are big. And yet again, ultimately, I don't know that it works. I think you probably have a good portion of your defense in the room. I think you have a good portion of your forwards in the room. And part of that's just because of contracts. These guys are signed to stay here. They're young. We've drafted a lot of these guys. And so ultimately, it almost seems like your solution to a certain extent has to be in the room, because you've almost handicapped yourself into being at that point by saying, hey, we're going to draft and develop and get these guys to be good NHL players together, to a certain extent, like what happened with Pominville and Roy and Miller back in the day. Right now, it just isn't paying off the same.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. The puzzle pieces have not fit, but the solution is in the room. Give me Tage Thompson's 22-23 season, give me UPL's 23-24 season, and then give me Zucker's season he's having right now. If we can get these all 3 happen at the same time, I think we're good. But again,
yeah, that's true.
We're not getting them happening at the same time. They're finding ways to do it. I think that makes it like, this is that let's bring in another meme that you ever see the one where they're like digging underground and it's like, you give up right before you get to like the diamonds. There's a chance they could be, with the youth on the team, everything. Like, and we've been saying this for the last 2 to 3 years, I'll eat it, that they could be like one knock away, really. Like, if Devin Levi ever makes that jump, like, you know what I mean? Like, I hate to say it. Like, you want to talk, like, everyone's acting like why it's such a mystery they suck. Take them back, like, literally 16 months, and we were putting the entire well-being of the franchise on Devin Levi. When you look at that as a move, then it kind of makes sense where we are now and where we're trying to recover from. So with that said, I think they still can recover. Like, yeah, is it frustrating as hell that Kevin like never seems to have any urgency when there's like, you can pick up somebody like to eat some cap room or get a pick or something? Like, is it frustrating? Yes. But at the same time, do any of those moves seem to be like making people or making teams into championship contenders? The only one that really had any tangible change was Patrick Kane going to the Detroit Red Wings last year, and they became a playoff team. Now, again, could eat that one, but I don't know if he produces the same in Buffalo. So it's all well unknown. And I think the solution is in the room. It's just, it still might take a while, unfortunately, for fans. That's not what they want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying forever that if this team, I mean, the ultimate goal, obviously we want the 13-year playoff drought to come to an end, but the ultimate goal is to raise a Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a move the Sabres could make selling off young pieces for a couple of veteran presence that are going to get them to that Stanley Cup conversation just to restart everything a couple of years. Like, this is the bed the Sabres have made. They're going to have to sleep in it and figure out a way for it to work. I still don't really get the rough signing without looking at any other coaches. They're going to be paying Jeff Skinner like $6 million in like 2 years. Whatever the case, cap's going up. I don't want to talk about that. But what I do want to talk about, 28 games left. We have 28 Sabres games left in the season.
A third of the fucking
absolutely crazy happens, we have 28 games. Fellas, how are we feeling in this final stretch here? We have 28 games in like 54 days. I think I did the math. So like, we're moving pretty quickly in this back half of the season. What do you want to see? Are you going to be seeing a lot of it? Maniac, if you want to get us going here.
I'll go first real quick. Tage healthy. Jack Quinn to continue to kind of pull out of his slump here. Cousins to get some confidence. Kulik to keep doing what he's done. And then UPL to just finish out the year strong are my 5 that I'm hoping for, no matter what.
Yeah, I think ultimately I would like to see just more consistent brand hockey, and I don't know what that means specifically other than just stop blowing 2-goal leads would be great. I would love if they could start strong and finish okay as opposed to starting strong and finishing bad. It's a problem when you have multiple third periods this season when you have less than 5 shots on goal. That's a problem. And again, it's in stark contrast to the team that used to be a team that would end the first period with 4 to 5 shots on goal and then put together 17 shot on goal third periods. And I think, part of that's when you play with desperation, sometimes you play loose. And when you play with desperation and you have the talent and you have the speed and you have those intangibles, sometimes it'll pay off. But the living on the edge is maybe not the philosophy. I will say this. I mentioned earlier it's mathematically possible. And the Sabres point percentage wise have to play like a top 18 in the NHL to put themselves in a realistic position at like 94 points. That's really difficult. It's really difficult. And it's unfortunate because even if you were to and I think it was WGR with, I think it was Jeremy that said this in the morning, maybe 2 weeks ago. And I don't remember if it was like if Nate was the one who was on and said this, if it was Joe DiBiase who mentioned it, but if the Sabres played, I think it was Jeremy that said if they played after winning games in a row, right before that Nashville game, if they were to play and win ultimately what ended up being a 13-game winning streak, they would still be not in a playoff spot. And if they were to only get
right now.
Yeah, and if you were to get only a 10-game win streak put together, and assuming every other team continues on their points percentage pace, you're still 4 to 5 teams out of being in a wild card spot. So as much as that 13-game winning streak or losing streak, I should say, was really unfortunate because, yeah, not only were some of those games where you had big leads and then you lost them, and then also just got throttled by Montreal in there at one point, you haven't exactly helped yourself throughout the rest of the season. Admittedly, yeah, I'd love to be only 5 or 6 points out right now instead of 12, instead of double-digit points. But, yeah, I mean, if you can do the Sabres get hot thing that they've done the last 3 seasons now, sure. I mean, ultimately, give us a chance to say we're so close again over the summer because, I don't know, I guess I'd rather have that than be drafting 5th, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's all I want. I want the Sabres to toy with my emotions this last 28 games, make me feel something because we have a long summer ahead. Bills are done. We got the Bandits. Love the Bandits. But the Sabres, we got a long summer ahead. I want them to toy with my emotions in every facet of the imagination. I want Jack Quinn to go off. I want Dylan Cousins to return. I want to see all the things I think about before I go to bed of the Sabres doing things they did years prior. I want them to show that. And then when October comes back again, they're going to forget all that. They're a great March and April organization. I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to come back again because that's what always seems to happen with this team is they get down and out with their belly up in the season and they put the pieces together somehow, some way. And I think it's pretty probable it's going to happen. I don't know if you fellows have any more final thoughts here on the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs.
No, just hoping for my 5 things and hoping for the Sabres to be relatively healthy down the stretch. Don't want to get some crazy injury to a big piece.
Nope.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a little bit of fun. With football season over, definitely now there's a void of my attention. Not that I didn't pay attention to hockey at all since, football season started, but there's now attention to be given, and I plan on turning most of that attention to hockey. I don't know, maybe I'll do laundry at some point, but ultimately hockey's going to get a lot of my attention, and I don't want it to be as unenjoyable as to a certain extent it can be. So I'm hoping I enjoy it. And with that said, Rochester looks pretty good again. Amherst are a bit hot, and maybe if they can stay that way, and at some point, they got to be able to go on a long playoff run and get by the Hershey Bears, man. I mean, I just don't want them to run into the train tracks of the Hershey Bears again.
Yeah, fellas, I was just in Puxatawny for Groundhog's Day last weekend, and I feel like I'm living Groundhog's Day on this podcast. I feel like we've done this episode so many times of, they sucked, but we have some fun months ahead maybe, and Rochester's good. So we're going to go off that note here.
Go Tage.
Go Tage.
Speaking of which, this does make me feel a little bit better. I don't know if we mentioned this, so.
Why does it make you feel better?
Because that he's not out there getting injured or tweaking something.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah,
I don't like that anybody gets injured. Like, I'm not happy. I don't know. No. Yeah, I'm really playing it on the line on this pod. I got sexual harassment memes. I got wishing injuries on people. No, I am just happy, like I said, because it is one of my priorities. Tage Thompson, no injuries. If him not playing means no injuries, then let's do that.
Okay, in that case, I agree with what you're saying. I thought you were saying like, this makes me feel better that Shea Theodore is now injured. I don't know about that. No, that's not what you're. Okay, I agree with that. The fact that there was an injury and a player's going to miss time coming back to the NHL is why, it makes you feel better about Tage not playing. Okay, I agree with that sentiment. Yeah.
If anything, that pisses me off because they're going to find a way to just put that cap space to work right away.
Yeah, he's going LTIR right now.
But folks, thanks again for tuning into the Crossing Swords podcast. This is Maniac. This is V Cristiano 3, Gatesy 35. That's my cat Goose. This is the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel.